Hello and welcome to Story Starters. My name is Kayla Ferguson, the Children's Librarian at Dubuque County Library. So this is a weekly program that we're going to be doing for the time being. Every week we'll have a new story that I'll read the first couple chapters from. We'll be switching back and forth between newer books and then also classic children's novels to give everyone a mix of different types of books, different time periods, and different genres. So the book that we are going to start out with today is City Spies by James Ponti. It is a fairly new release that we have at the Dubuque County Library. So hopefully if you join in with this series, you'll find some books that you enjoy and that you might want to check out from the library to finish. Also, if you're at home listening, I encourage you to maybe grab some drawing supplies or painting supplies, or play with Legos or blocks on the floor or on the table, or just do something creative while you're listening that the story might inspire you, or just do whatever comes to your mind. Although if you want to just sit and listen, that's also totally okay. So City Spies. Chapter 1. A Man Called Mother. Sarah looked at the water stain on the wall and imagined it was an island. She wasn't sure if that was because it actually looked like one, or just because she so desperately wished she were in some tropical paradise far from Brooklyn and this tiny room on the 8th floor of King's Country Family Court. She sat across the table from her public defender, a massive man in a rumpled suit named Randall Stubbs. His bulky frame hunched over as he scanned her file. "This doesn't look good," he muttered, because stating the obvious was apparently something they taught in law school. "You're lucky they've made such a generous offer." "They have?" Sarah asked, surprised. "What is it?" He looked up from the file and said, "You plead guilty to all charges and get 30 months in juvenile detention." 2.5 years in juvie didn't sound generous to Sarah. But it probably wasn't much worse than her last few foster homes. She was tough for a 12-year-old. She could handle it. "And of course," he added, "you won't be allowed near a computer." This, however, was unacceptable. For how long? "For the duration of your sentence. Maybe longer as a condition of your release. That'll be up to the judge." "But all I did was—" "What?" he interrupted. "Hack into a computer network for the entire juvenile justice system of New York City? Is that what you were going to say? Because that's not what I'd call a all I did situation." "I know, but I was only trying to—" "It doesn't matter what you were trying to do," he said. "All that matters is what you did. You're lucky you're 12. If you were 13, they probably would have bumped you up into a higher court to make an example out of you." The weight of this hit her hard, and for the first time she regretted her actions. Not because they were against the law. Legal or not, she had no doubt that she'd done the right thing. But she'd never considered that she could be banished from the one corner of the world that made sense to her. The only time Sarah felt at home was when she was sitting at a computer keyboard. "I'll never hack again," she said. "I promise." "Oh, you promise," he responded sarcastically. "Maybe you can cross your heart and hope to die once we get into the court. I'm sure that'll fix everything." Sarah struggled when it came to controlling her temper, a diagnosis confirmed by multiple counselors and at least 2 school psychologists. Still, she tried to keep cool as she looked at the man who was supposed to be helping her. She couldn't risk angering him, because he was her only hope for a positive outcome. So she took a deep breath and counted to 10. a tip from one of the counselors whose name she'd long since forgotten. "If I can't use a computer," she said, barely masking her desperation, "then I can't do the one thing I'm good at, the thing that makes me special." "Yeah, well, you should have thought of that before you—" She probably would have lost her temper right then and there if the door hadn't suddenly flown open, and into the room stepped a man who was in every way the opposite of her attorney. He was tall and thin, with a thatch of unruly black hair. His suit was impeccable. His tie matched his pocket square, and he spoke with a British accent. "Sorry to interrupt," he said politely, "but I believe you're in my seat." "You've got the wrong room," grumbled Stubbs. "Now, if you don't mind, I'm having a conference with my client." "Except, according to the substitute of counsel form, she's my client," the other man replied as he showed Stubbs a piece of paper. This brought an instant smile to Sarah's face. Stubbs eyed the man. "That doesn't make any sense. She can't afford a fancy lawyer like you. She doesn't have any money." "Of course she doesn't have any money. She's 12. 12-year-olds don't have money. They have bicycles and rucksacks. This one, however, also happens to have an attorney. This paper says I've been retained to represent Miss Sarah Maria Martinez." He turned to her and smiled. "Is that you?" "Yes, sir." "Brilliant. That means I'm in the right place." "Who retained you?" asked the public defender. "An interested party," said the man. "Beyond that, it's not your concern. So if you'll please leave, Sarah and I have much to talk about. We're due before a judge shortly." Stubbs mumbled to himself as he shoveled his papers into his briefcase. "I'm going to check this out." "There's a lovely lady named Valerie who can help you," said the British man. "She's with a clerk of the court on the 7th floor. "I know where she is," Stubbs snapped as he squeezed past the man into the hallway. He started to say something else, but instead just made a frustrated noise and stormed off. Once Stubbs was gone, the new attorney closed the door and sat across from Sarah. "I've never seen that before," he marveled. "He literally left the room in a huff." She had no idea who might have hired an attorney for her, but she was certainly happy for the change. "I've never seen it either. Now tell me," he said as he popped open the latches of his briefcase, "is it true? Did you hack into the computers of the city's juvenile justice system?" She hesitated to answer. "You needn't worry. Attorney-client privilege forbids me from telling anyone what you say in here. I just need to know if it's true." She gave a slight nod. "Yes, it's true." "Brilliant," he said with a wink. He pulled a small computer from his briefcase and handed it to her. "I need you to do it again." "Do it again?" she asked. "Hack into the juvenile justice database," he said. "I need you to make me your attorney of records before Mr. Stubbs gets to the 7th floor and checks for himself." "You mean you're not my attorney?" she asked. "Never set foot in a law school," he said conspiratorially. "So, chop chop. I've got an associate who's going to delay him in the hallway. She'll only be able to do that for so long." Sarah's head was spinning. She didn't know what to think. "Listen, I don't know who you are, but the court's supposed to assign me a lawyer. A real one. And the chap with the mustard stain on his tie is the one it assigned," he replied, shaking his head. "I don't know about you, but I'm not particularly impressed. Over the last 9 years, that same court has assigned you to 6 foster families and 9 schools. It's been one botched job after another with them. What do you say we try something new?" She looked at him, and then at the computer. She was tempted, but she was also confused. "I don't think—" "What did he say would happen?" he interrupted. "I bet he's already worked out a deal with the prosecutor. 2.5 years in juvie, and I'm banned from using a computer." He shook his head. "I can do better than that, even without a law degree." For reasons she didn't fully understand, Sarah believed him. Maybe it was wishful thinking. Maybe it was desperation. Either way, she trusted her gut and started typing. Excellent, he said. You probably won't regret this. Probably? She raised an eyebrow. Shouldn't you be trying to build up my confidence? Only fools and liars speak with certainty about things beyond their control, he replied. But I'm optimistic, so I'd rate your chances around 87%. Sarah smiled and continued typing. What kind of computer is this? Bespoke, he answered. I thought I knew all the computer companies, but I've never heard of that one. It's not a company, he said. Bespoke means something has been tailor-made to the specific needs of an individual. Someone made this for you? He nodded. Well, whoever bespoke it really knew what they were doing. Wait until you see the massive one, he said. You're going to love it. That is, if we're not both behind bars by the end of the day. Sarah knew computers well, but she'd never seen one like this. It was fast and powerful, and she quickly shredded through the firewall that was supposed to protect the juvenile justice portal. They didn't even fix the back door I used the other day, she said in disbelief. Large institutions move slowly, he said. Hopefully large attorneys do too. It took her less than 2 minutes to reach the database for attorney assignments. She happily deleted the entry for Randall Stubbs and asked, What's your name? Excellent question, he said as he pulled 3 passports out of his briefcase. Which sounds best? He read from the first one. Croydon St. Vincent, Marlborough the Third. He gave a sour face. Seems a bit excessive, don't you think? She nodded. Yes. We'll pass on that. He read from the next. Nigel Honeybuns. This one made him snicker. Honeybuns. I quite like that. He tucked it into his pocket in his briefcase. I think I'll save that one for another time. We're kind of in a hurry, she reminded him. Right, here we go, he said, reading from the last one. Gerald Anderson. That sounds like a proper barrister. Dull, boring, eminently forgettable, which is exactly what we want. That's my name, Gerald Anderson. He handed her the passport so that she could check the spelling as she typed it into the database. I just clicked update, she said as she finished, and we're all set. He flashed a nervous smile and paused to listen. No alarms. He opened the door and leaned out into the hallway. No one rushing in to arrest us. Very nice work, Sarah. Except now I have an attorney who's never gone to law school. I've watched a ton of courtroom dramas on the telly, he said. I can handle an appearance before a judge. Don't you mean probably? She replied. He smiled at this. Right, probably. First, though, I'll need details about the hack. I'm sure they're all in here, she said, pointing at the file. This only tells me what you did, he replied. I want to know the reason. The lawyer, the one who actually went to law school, said it didn't matter why I did it. It may not matter to him. It might not even matter to the judge. But it matters to me very much. She thought about her answer for a moment, trying to come up with the most straightforward way to tell it. She didn't want to get upset. She hated showing emotions in front of anyone. My most recent foster parents, Leonard and Deborah Clark. Yeah, them, she said with a sneer. They like to take in more children than they have room for because the state pays them by the kid. More kids means more money, whether they spend it on us or not. No one really checks that. We were crammed into bedrooms that were too small. Rather than give everyone a meal, they put food in the middle of the table. So it looked like there was more than there was. They called it family style, which is a joke because they treated us like anything but a family. A new kid named Gabriel came about a month ago. He was scared, sad, lonely, everything you would expect from a 5-year-old. He liked me because we were the only Hispanic kids in the house. You spoke Spanish to him? Sometimes, she said, until they made us stop. Mr. Clark told me, you're in America now, so speak English. Speaking English is something you're going to have to get used to." The lawyer shook his head. "And what did you say to that?" "I pointed out that Puerto Rico was already part of America, that I'd spent almost my entire life in Brooklyn, and that if he really wanted to speak English well, he should end sentences with prepositions." The man laughed. "Cheeky." "I'm not exactly sure what cheeky means, but his cheeks turned red, so I guess so," she replied. "Did you get in trouble?" he asked. She nodded, the humor of the moment gone. "I could handle his punishment, though. It was Gabriel who couldn't." "Why was Gabriel punished?" She paused and saw him studying her expression. He wanted to watch her eyes as she spoke. "One night he wet his bed," she answered, "and to punish him they locked him in the hall closet. I could hear him crying. They didn't care. They would have let him cry all night. So I got up and I let him out." "And then what happened?" he asked. "Then they locked me in the closet with him, told me I had to learn my place. So I picked the lock from the inside and let us both out." She was on the verge of tears, so she stopped for a moment. "And then," he prodded, "they locked us outside on the roof. They left us there all night. It was cold. It was terrifying. The next morning I went to school, got a pass to the computer lab, and started working. First I hacked the juvenile justice database to see how many kids had been sent to the Clarks. Then I hacked their bank accounts to show how much money they were taking in and where they were actually spending it." "You're not being charged with hacking the bank," he said, flipping through some pages. She grinned. "Yeah, they dropped their complaint. I'm pretty sure they don't want the world to find out that a 12-year-old girl beat their security system." "Nice," he said. "I might be able to use that later. What'd you do with the information once you'd gotten it?" "I sent everything to my social worker," she said. "And do you know how stupid I am? When I saw the police coming up to the house, I thought they were going to arrest the two of them. For about 45 seconds, I was happy. But they arrested you instead." She nodded. "Clark's even had the other kids line up on the porch so they would see me being let out of the house in handcuffs." She closed her eyes tight, determined not to let a single tear fall. "They said, 'This is what happens to criminals.'" He'd actually heard the story the night before, through a listening device, but he liked hearing stories twice. He wanted to see if they changed. That was always a good indicator of how truthful they were. Besides, seeing her face as she recalled it told him everything he needed to know. "That's a good reason," he said. "I can work with that. I can make this a lot better." "Don't you mean probably?" she asked. He smiled warmly. "No, I'm certain I can. But I'll need you to do something difficult. Something the reports in the files say you're completely incapable of." "What's that?" she asked. "I need you to trust me," he said. "No matter what I say or do, I need you to trust me." "How can I trust you?" she said. "I don't even know your name." "Sure you do. It's Nigel Honeybuns, or Gerald Anderson. Sometimes it's even Croydon St. Vincent Marlborough III. It all depends on the situation," he said with a shrug. "But my friends and colleagues, and I do hope that's a group that you'll soon consider yourself to be a part of, they all call me Mother." For the first time since she'd been arrested, Sarah laughed. "Mother? That's an unusual name for a man." "True," he said, smiling at her. "But I'm an unusual man, wouldn't you say?" Chapter 2. Cruncham Hall. The reports in Sarah's file were accurate. She didn't trust people, especially adults. To be fair, not many had given her reason to do so. There had been a few nice teachers along the way, and 2 good foster families, but that was about it. Now, as she sat in a holding cell waiting to be called into the courtroom, she was having second thoughts about trusting a man who called himself Mother and carried at least 3 phony passports in his briefcase. "Rich girl, you gonna help me out?" There were only 3 other girls in the cell, but it took Sarah a moment to realize this one was talking to her. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "I'm not rich." They were sitting on blue wooden benches facing each other, about 4 feet apart. The older, larger girl leaned closer. "I saw your lawyer," she said. "Shiny suit, expensive shoes. You've got to have money to have a lawyer like that. Maybe he can help me out too. Or maybe I can look after you, keep you safe once we get to juvie. It won't cost your family much." "Leave her alone." The warning came from an unlikely source, a girl named Emily who shared a cell with Sarah the night before. Her perfectly manicured nails gave the impression that she knew her way around a salon much better than she did a jail cell. She'd told Sarah that she'd been arrested for shoplifting, and her mother was making her spend the night behind bars to teach her a lesson. "No one was talking to you, princess," the first girl said. "Well, if Sarah needs anyone to look after her, I'll do it," Emily replied. "So thanks, but no thanks." The first girl stood and towered over them, her attention now fully focused on Emily. "How do you plan on protecting anybody?" "Really, guys," Sarah said, trying to calm the situation, "it's all a misunderstanding. I don't have any money, and I don't need any protection." Emily ignored her and got up in the other girl's face. "I'll just use these," she said, flashing her thumbs. "What, you gonna text somebody for help on that phone you shoplifted?" "No," Emily replied flatly. "I'm gonna do this." With lightning speed, she jabbed her thumbs deep into the sides of the larger girl's ribcage, making her gasp for air and stagger backward. Sarah stared in amazement as Emily reached over and carefully guided the other girl back to the bench, making sure she didn't fall. "It'll hurt for a while, maybe bruise a bit, but there's no real damage," Emily said in a half whisper. "I can't promise I'll go as easy on you the next time, so you might want to think twice before you threaten anyone else." Sarah sat there amazed and was still trying to make sense of it all when a guard came to the door. "Martinez, Sarah," he announced. She was too distracted to respond. "Martinez, Sarah," he repeated. "That's me. Time for court," he said, unlocking the cell door. Sarah looked back at Emily, who said, "Good luck in there." "Thanks," she replied as she got up and started to leave. She nodded towards the girl, who was still catching her breath. "Thanks for that, too." Emily smiled. "It's what cell sisters do, right?" Sarah followed the guard into the courtroom. Her mind was still distracted by what had happened between the 2 girls as she sat at the defendant's table next to Mother. "You all right?" he asked when he saw her expression. "Yeah," she said, "I'm fine." "Good, because I need your full attention," he said, "and I need you to remember the part about trusting me." She didn't know what to make of him, but there wasn't any time to figure it out. The bailiff stood and announced the judge's entrance. "All rise for the Honorable Lyman J. Pancake. Court is now in session." Mother smirked. Pancake. Maybe I should have gone with honey buns after all. We would have been like a breakfast buffet. Sarah didn't laugh. She wasn't in a joking mood. Neither was the Honorable Lyman J. Pancake. He might have had a funny name, but the rest of him appeared completely humorless. Perhaps a lifetime of listening to flapjack jokes had worn away his good nature. His expression could best be described as puckered, as if he'd just drunk lemonade without enough sugar. What little hair he had left formed a semicircle of white bristle that started above his ears and met somewhere in the back. After some formalities, he asked, "How does the defendant plead?" Mother looked up from his briefcase long enough to announce, "Guilty, Your Honor." Sarah knew she was guilty, but thought there'd be some negotiations before they admitted it. From what she'd seen on television, guilty people usually started off claiming to be innocent. The judge turned to the prosecuting attorney and asked, Is there a plea arrangement, Miss Adams? The prosecutor was tall and lean, with short blonde hair. Her youthful face hinted that she'd only been out of law school for a few years, and her huge smile indicated that she was delighted, if perhaps a bit surprised, to hear the guilty plea. No, Your Honor, she replied. I had preliminary discussions with Miss Martinez, original attorney, but no agreement was reached. She looks really happy, Sarah whispered nervously. I don't think you were supposed to plead guilty. Is that true, Mr. Anderson? Asked the judge. Rather than respond, Mother kept shuffling through his papers. It took Sarah a moment to realize that it was because he didn't recognize his phony name. Is that true, Mr. Anderson? The judge repeated, this time a bit louder. Sarah nudged him. You're Mr. Anderson. Oops, he whispered to her. Told you it was forgettable. He turned his attention to the judge and asked, Is what true, Your Honor? That you have not reached a plea agreement with the prosecution. It's my understanding that opposing counsel has offered a sentence of 2.5 years in juvenile detention, Mother said. That may have been discussed as one of the several possibilities, the prosecutor replied with a Cheshire cat grin. But like I said, there was no official agreement. And now that there's an admission of guilt in the open court, I'm not inclined to let her off so easy. Sarah slumped in her chair. Things were going from bad to worse in a hurry. That's fine, said Mother, because we find that offer unsatisfactory. I guarantee you won't get a better one, she said. I don't want a better one, he replied. I want one that's worse. Now Sarah was really confused. I'm sorry, what? Asked the judge. 30 months just isn't enough, Mother replied. My client compromised highly secure computer files, and although it's not listed among the charges, she also hacked into the financial records of a multinational bank. Hey, protested Sarah. What about attorney-client privilege? That would only apply if I was actually an attorney, he whispered. He turned back to the judge and continued, Your Honor, this behavior is serious and calls for more than 2.5 years. Personally, I think she should remain in custody until she turns 18. What are you doing? Sarah pleaded under her breath. That's 6 years. One moment, Your Honor, he said, raising a finger. I need to confer with my client. Mother leaned in so close that he was right next to Sarah's ear. As crazy as this sounds, this is the part where you'll need to trust me. But you're arguing for a harsher penalty than the one they offered, she said. That doesn't make sense. It will when I'm done, he said. Just give me 90 seconds. He unclasped his watch and held it up to her. Then you can decide. So that's where I'm going to end the excerpt for today. So again, the book that I have been reading from is Spies by James Ponti. And we have this book at the Dubuque County Library. So if you enjoyed the beginning, the first chapter and a half, I recommend you check it out and see how it ends. So thank you for joining us for our first week of Story Starters. And we'll be back next Wednesday with another book. Bye.